Hey, then
What up, what up, what up? Welcome to another episode of New Orleans Basketball. As always, I am your host, Raphael Rattler, joined by my fellow middle brother, Garrick Rattler. What's poppin' with you, bro?
Basketball is back, baby.
Yes, it is.
Love to see it. Love to see it. Well, NBA back, a form of NBA basketball. NBA players took the floor with referees and organized time being kept to play other people who are also in the NBA. So a win is a win. But no, man, everything's all good on this end. Trying to push through these summer months into these fall months, and man, if you don't have to be outside, don't be outside. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. But how's everything on your end, bro?
Everything is as blessed as it could be, man. I mean, I was really looking forward to the Liberty's Aces game, and then very quickly,
Sabrina said, "Oh yeah, huh? You looking forward to that, huh?"
Very quickly that turns south. But again, they've got. I kind of like how their schedule works out. How they've got 3 games the next month leading into the postseason. Like I kind of like that, right? I kind of like that. It's cool. But yeah, man. We'll get into the USA basketball and things like that. We got preseason coming up this Saturday. We got the Hall of Fame game, all that, man. Like it feels like we're getting there. We're slowly getting there, but we're getting there. But before we get too far in the show, make sure you guys follow us on Twitter, on IG, on TikTok. That's NO Basketball, no E. Make sure you like the episode below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, New Orleans Basketball, and anything New Orleans Network related. Something tells me this fall is going to be a lot of fun with that. So we got to talk about some basketball. Again, finally, we get to talk about some on-court basketball. So the U.S. had their first friendly, let's call it friendly, in terms of the FIBA tournament play this week against Puerto Rico. I tweeted it out, man, like seeing Jose before the game in BI, that was cool, man, to see them interact on that stage. But, man, Jose just would have made the game so much fun. Now, obviously, the U.S. ran away with it in the third quarter. It was a pretty good game in the first part. Shout out Tremaine Waters, who was hooping in that first half out of LSU. Like, it was a good game, but like after the third quarter, it's like, okay, like we have NBA players and you don't, right? But at the same time, like I feel like Jose would have made that game so much more fun on the mere fact that he would have got on somebody's nerves on the US team, and that would have made it more fun. But the reason why we want to talk today is we want to talk about Brandon Ingram. Brandon Ingram started the game, which, not to my surprise or not to your surprise, but to some people's surprise, Brandon Ingram started the game and let it out that first group. So what were your initial thoughts and impressions with BI in his first U.S. national play?
Well, I think the first thing that I saw was, when he came out and warmed up and like the camera started focusing on, I'm like, man, that's a bigger guy than we saw leave the season last season. And I think that can only bode well for the Pelicans. If he's gonna come back looking like that. And it wasn't a lot of like muscle, like he didn't go in and like over muscle himself. He just looks like he's growing and like he's filling out a little bit. And he looks like a different physical player. And you kind of saw some of it on the floor, right? You saw him being more aggressive, being more physical, getting in the muck of things. He got a block, right? I saw that was one of the things. But he did get 2 blocks. That one, the way he just met the dude, like the dude came right up to him, and B.I. was like, yeah, that's not gonna work. And he swatted him up vertical. I think that was the one that kind of took me. But all in all, listen, his shot, we'll talk about it a little bit going forward. His shot had been, reported as, it looked bad. He didn't make a lot of shots in the practices. And then it kind of stretched over to the game that he didn't make a lot of shots, right? But I think what you saw was a guy who was getting adjusted to being a bigger player. And you saw a guy who was able to contribute in other ways, right? Not letting, not making shots. matriculate down into the other things of his game. And one of the things that I did like, there was a possession in the second quarter, I think it was, where, he came down and he missed a shot. And then, Puerto Rico came down and they missed the shot. And I think Ant got the board. No, B.I. got the board. He brought it down. He passed it to Ant. And Ant gave it right back to him. And B.I. kind of shot a dead-eye three with a guy closing out on him. Like, nah, man, this is what I do. And then he made that one. It shows that, he's not letting those shots get into his head. And I think that as time goes on, as he gets adjusted to this new body frame that he has and things like that, I think that it's going to look a lot better and bode well for the Pelicans. So all in all, I think, it was a solid debut. This is a guy who hasn't played basketball in a while. And now you get on the floor with these guys who have just kind of been put together very shortly, right? You have all of these practices, but it can't really substitute for like being in game and having guys guard you who aren't your teammates in Herb Jones and Trey Murphy, or who are just there for the select and they know that they aren't trying to like go too hard and everything. These are guys who are trying to stop him. And I think him getting more adjusted to the team, you'll see. But I think he looked the physical look. He looked a lot bigger and a lot better that he looked, leading it last season. So what about you? What you thought about him?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. And David Griffin, he hit it on the head at the end of the season. He said, a lot of the times, when B.I. in particular goes into his offseason session and works on his body, and every year he's been coming back stronger and looking bigger because, again, at the beginning, he wasn't working with much, right? And so it takes him a while to kind of get into a groove from a shooting standpoint. I agree with you. Like, it's obvious he looks bigger in terms of the size, and so probably getting that rhythm is why he's playing FIBA in the first place, right? So he could start the season kind of already in a role. Some of the things that stood out to me and some of the things I was hoping, B.I. would be able to take from this is like he was really giving good effort defensively. Like whether it was guarding the out of bounds play, he had a steal on an out of bounds play at one of the scrimmages this week, or it was just getting up into to defender or to offensive players. Like he was using his size to his advantage, both on the offensive and the defensive floor. Like he got to the free throw line well, he just kind of put his head down. And you and I have talked about it at the end of last season when he said, I'm not going to flop. I'm not going to do those things. Now he's got to add more free throw attempts to his game and more catch and shoot attempts to his game and things like that. So seeing that sign of him using his strength that he's added to get to the free throw line, that was encouraging as well. But the thing that you pointed out was actually a different Ant and B.I. possession. I think it was really important that he's grabbing the ball off the boards and pushing the pace, because that's something that Willie Green has talked about. Like, we need to play with more pace. We have too much youth to play so slow and only play in the half court. And I like to see that. But there was a particular possession where him and Ant were kind of passing the ball back and forth and kind of turned into a two-man play, even though it shouldn't have been. And I'm like, man, like, those are your predatory wings on this USA roster. And so watching those two develop chemistry together, B.I. said it in an interview afterwards. He's like, hey, we got two scorers in the starting lineup, talking about him and himself. Like, watching their chemistry develop over this FIBA tournament will be interesting for multiple purposes, right? Like, I think when you need to get a bucket and you need to get a score, those are probably going to be your two best options. But also, how does B.I. feed off another alpha on the court? And how does that fall into the regular season when hopefully number one is available too? But I do have a question for you, because again, like, we watch a lot of basketball, we listen to a lot of things and things like that. And like, I don't feel as if Brandon Ingram's name is getting mentioned very much at all. Like, you're hearing about the Jalen Brunson leadership and obviously what Tyrese Halliburton was able to do in his show cam, and Austin Reeves, who apparently has a fan club and things like that. You're hearing, Jared Jackson Jr. is the most MVP player, but you're not hearing very much about Brandon Ingram and what his role can be on this FIBA team going into this next month. My question to you is B.I. not being like looked at close enough as being the closer on this team? Like, Jalen Brunson, for all his worth of his leadership and his ability to do this before, like he went to the Olympic team as a non-NBA player, as an amateur and things like that. And so he has that experience and things like that. And obviously he's a little bit older, a little bit more mature, obviously a leader, point guard on the floor. But when I look at like clutch scoring in the NBA last season, De'Aaron Fox won much, which is a cool award. I kind of like that they added that in the NBA. But De'Aaron Fox won most clutch player in the league, averaging 5 points in the last 5 minutes of a 5-possession or 5-point differential game or not. Brandon Ingram averaged 3.7. The only person who was more than that on this particular US team was Jalen Brunson. The next person, Anthony Edwards, averaged 1 point in those. So, like, are we not looking at the fact that people might be looking to BI when the US got their either backs on the rope or they're trying to put a team away?
I mean, absolutely. But this isn't something that Brandon Ingram isn't new to BI, right? BI has been knocking on the door of superstardom, it seems like, every year, right? And then every year he does something, and obviously the wheels come off, and the Pelicans either deal with some injury or something. But like, we saw what he did his first shot at the playoffs against the number 1 seed Suns. He was phenomenal. And I think that Brandon Ingram's ability, and you can not talk about it all you want, but the coaches know, right? There's a reason why Brandon Ingram is cemented firmly in that starting lineup because he's 6'10", 7 feet, I want to call him, and he's able to score from all kinds of places and do that other teams won't be a guard. But I think when you speak about in the clutch, right, and Anthony Edwards, and rightfully so, is he's just signed a max contract. He is the superstar that he wants to see take the next step, including us, right? Like, we want to see him. We want to see this next level of Anthony Edwards as well.
He's a hard player,
and I think that yeah, absolutely, and I think you're seeing the platform for Anthony Edwards to kind of ascend and start to take that, right? And it comes with like the media narrative, right? And this is the guy, right? And who's going to be the guy outside of this? But Brandon Ingram is a proven scorer, proven clutch scorer, proven guy, go-to guy in the fourth quarter, proven bucket maker. And I think that his abilities are going to show very well, especially in FIBA, where there's not a lot of guys in the NBA at his size, right? We talk about him not beating the Kevin Durant allegations out there wearing number 7. That is an elite class of scorers, of guys of that height. That's an elite class, and Brandon Ingram is right up there. And so he's going to get an opportunity to show. And to be honest with you, up until they get to like Canada, you probably won't have to worry about the full quarters a lot with this team. Up until you get to the Canadas and the Spains and teams like that, you probably won't have to worry too much about the full quarter scoring in this team. But I think that Brandon Ingram is definitely one of the better scorers, one of the most unique talents on this team, on this FIBA team. And I think he's going to bring the team home in a couple of games. And we won't have to worry about, is he being discussed or not, because he'll make sure that he is.
Well, one thing I can't wait to see is the U.S. plays another friendly versus Slovenia on Saturday versus Luka Doncic. And I would love to see
wait. Luka Doncic, who had 37, 14, and 11 today.
He's ridiculous.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did.
But I would love to see BI and Luka kind of go at it to kind of close out games. I think it'll be fun in that one. So you mentioned, everybody knows, whether you're an NBA pundit or whether you're an NBA player or whatnot, that BI is a 3-level scorer. But I think there was a stigma to him before he got to the Pelicans that he was kind of a ball hog, right? Like, he wasn't really looking to get other people involved. He wasn't really looking to facilitate. He was looking to get his, right? Like, that's kind of the progression of young players who can score the ball. They got to figure it out on that end. So you and I have already talked about this several times on separate episodes. Like, he has the talent, again, if healthy. It was funny. There was a commentator who was introducing BI at the game last night, and even he was like, man, this guy, if healthy, I'm like, but in the scenario, like, he has all NBA talent, but like, from your perspective, and again, from I guess people just not seeing Brandon Ingram enough because the Pelicans haven't been winning enough, and when he was on the Lakers, they weren't winning enough, and things like that. So his exposure hasn't been high. But what are the things that stand out to you that say, in a situation like this where he can really gather experience and take that into the season and propel his team moving forward, what's going to be the things that make up that all NBA type talent and showcase for Brandon Ingram this season?
Well, for me, it's two things. It's two things. The first thing is health. It just, it's the ugly elephant in the room. BI has to be on the floor. I think that we talked about this off the pod. I think it's going to be very hard to keep Brandon Ingram off of an all NBA team if he plays 60 games, right? If you
65
think
games.
about
That's the new rule.
65 games, right? 65 games. Because you think about the guys who will not be doing it, right? They won't be playing 65 games. So you can take out some of his competition, right? Like Kawhi and Paul George. Maybe those guys don't play 65 games. But I think his skills allow him to be in that mix if he could just stay healthy the rest of the season. But I think the second thing is that Brandon Ingram has to commit to becoming a winning player. He has to commit to it. And we've seen flashes of it, right? We've seen long strands of it. But it's the consistency of it being an entire season. Listen, for all the bad things you can say about Jaylen Brown, he consistently, right, throughout the entirety of the season and into the postseason, he was a consistent, winning player, a guy who scores, who stepped up his assists, stepped up his rebounds, and he was handsomely rewarded for it with an All-NBA selection, and he was handsomely rewarded for it with a max contract right after the biggest contract in NBA history so far. So, and he plays next to an alpha, an MVP candidate, in Jason Tatum. Brandon Ingram can do the exact same thing, but he has to bring it consistently. What separates Jaylen Brown from other players in the league? Defensively. Can you bring it defensively night in, night out, and not be a liability, not be, a guy that falls asleep? Those are the things that contribute to winning. Jaylen Brown took another step as far as passing, as far as playmaking, right? Obviously, he has his faults with dribbling and going left. But I think that, you saw a step in progression as far as passing the ball and getting other guys involved. Brandon Ingram has to do that as well. He has to become, a de facto secondary playmaker, right? This is a guy who has to, look for others first because you can get your shot off at any point in time. 20 points 10, 15 points in a quarter for Brandon Ingram is nothing, right? Mm-hmm. We've seen it on multiple occasions. He can get hot and get to that mid-range shot, get to that mid-city BI, and he can use that over and over again. And before you know it, he's up to 25. But can you get the assists going? Can you get steals going? Can you contribute in different pockets of the game? Because scoring is so easy for you. So to commit to being a winning player means that this is night in and night out. There is no stopping it. There is no off games. You have to bring it at night in and night out. And that's how Brandon Ingram ascends to the ranks of all NBA and become one of the household names and household players because the talent is there. The physical abilities are there. The walking mismatch that he is there. It's going to be there every time. But I think once BI fully commits to it, and we're starting to see it, right? He's starting to hit the weights. He's starting we saw it in this FIBA game, get to the free throw line, look for contact, dive for loose balls to save the game, get blocks. Those are the things because scoring is going to come easy for the BI and for this team, really, with guys like CJ and Zion and Brandon Ingram and JV and Trey and Jordan Hawkins. Scoring is not going to be the problem. It's can you replicate what you did on defense last year? And then once you include Zion and for Brandon Ingram for sure, once you include, a renewed Brandon Ingram, I think that they need to replicate that defensive effort, and it has to be spearheaded by Zion and hopefully all NBA hopeful Brandon Ingram.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that new stipulation, that new rule that 65 games have to be played is huge because BI hasn't done that since his rookie year, right? And so if he wants that, it's keeping his body upright. I absolutely agree. It's the little things, man. Like there was a particular play in the U.S. game yesterday where like the ball either went out of bounds off a bad shot, and it could have just gone out of bounds, but BI dove out of bounds, saved, and then somebody scored 2 points. Like it's those things. Like I remember certain plays throughout the year last year, like in the OKC where they couldn't box out multiple times on a free throw, and it's like, man, that's the game right there, right? And so if you're going to be that all NBA player, I agree with you. It's the little things that have to go in. Defense is a big part of it as well. You've got to commit yourself that way. But the thing that I think separates BI and why his talent is underspoken for is his ability to play make. Like last year, he was top 15 in usage in the NBA, and his turnovers were a career high. But then you look at his usage to assist ratio, The only other wings that had a better ratio in that department was Luka Doncic and LeBron James. That's pretty good names to be.
Those are some pretty good players.
Pretty good names to be attached to, right? And then, like, as you've seen his career develop and you've seen his skill and his game grow, like every year except for his third year in LA, his assists per games has grown, and getting the ball more and being able to facilitate and see the game and have the court vision is important. And not all guys get to. Like, some guys are able to put up 20 points for 30 years in a row, but at the same time can never pass the ball. Like, their X button is broken. But at the same time, like BI has grown in that area, right? And to be honest, with like a flawed roster, like one of those years he had Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe to pass to. And then like last year, the Pelicans were 29th in 3-point attempt. Like, and most of the shots that they were shooting were like catch and shoot. Like, they led the league in catch and shoot threes. And so like, in that scenario, in terms of their percentage of threes. And so, like, in that scenario, like, he is growing his game, even though he's not necessarily been in the position to really excel, right? Because Zion hasn't been on the court. So you would think those would be easy passes. Like, watching 2 years ago of Brandon Ingram, even the beginning of last year, it's like, oh man, Brandon was just racking up assists by throwing it down to number one and him scoring with the 2 seconds, stuff like that. So like he's been able to grow his game in a way that, I think not a lot of people saw coming out when they just kind of pegged him as a scorer. And for that facet alone, when you're able to not only get yours and impact the game from that perspective, but you can help everybody else, I think that's the level of superstardom that very few people get to. And that's when you look at that all NBA roster. But I think something that's important out of both this US experience for Brandon Ingram and just from everything you've seen over the last season is that, David Griffin talked about the reason why they were comfortable drafting Jordan Hawkins was that he was coming from a system that kind of had a non-traditional offense and that like their ball handler wasn't their point guard, right? And he's like, you know what? That's what we have here. We have 2 point forwards, right? Like the offense, if plan A, sticking with the summer, plan A, when Zion and BI are both on the court together, it should be run through your point forward. They may be like, I know CJ had a great year from an assist perspective last year, but I think they may be your 2 best passers on the team, right? And like when you look at their games, like it should work well together. Like again, like I was watching that BI and just a couple of those possessions, and I'm like, man, if you could just get Brandon Ingram and Zion in a pick, I don't know what you do. As the 2 defenders, you isolate them on one side of the court. I don't know how you defend that, well, in that perspective. And so that's up to Willie Green. That's up to James Borrego, where you're really going to look at them and say, is it going to be like staying years where it's like your turn, my turn? Or is it going to be like, hey, this is a part of the offense? Because you feel that sometime with the Celtics as well. Like, it's like, okay, Jaylen Brown, you go score. And it's like, okay, Jason Tatum, you go score. But more so like, how do you get the most out of them 2 being on the court at the same time? And so that coaching staff is going to be important for them to do that. But like, I got a question for you. And I know it may be like a unpopular question and things like that. But like, generally, when you've got predatory wings that can pass the way that these 2 guys and can turn it on at any point, like you said earlier, and can get their buckets, just like LeBron, just like D Wade, and some of these players in the past, you generally want to surround those players with shooters, right? Like you spread out the cores and you let those guys pick apart the defense. Did the Pelicans do enough this offseason in regards to shooting? Like, the league average was 36% 3-point shooting, right? And of course, Brandon Ingram's over that. CJ was over that. Trey's over that. And that's where it is. Like, that's where the Pelicans roster is. Like, Zion, you can't count. He shot less than 1. Kyra can't count because he barely played any games. So, like, in that scenario, like, you are below average when it comes to people who are able to make wide open shots. And you've got this list of feisty defenders and Dyson and Najee and Herb and Jose and all these guys who aren't necessarily great 3-point shooters. Like none of them were for above 36%. So like when you look at the roster, like are you still confident that if those 2 guys are on the court, the other guys will hit enough threes, or do you think that there's still some moves that could be made?
I'm like 70-30 and 70% say I think they have enough. Okay. I do. I think part of it is going to be more opportunities for Trey Murphy, more catch and shoot opportunities for a healthy CJ McCollum, because I think a lot of people forget that CJ had to get surgery, and that's on the shoulder and not on the thumb that was hurting him. And so he was dealing with a lot, right? He was dealing with a lot and being asked a lot. And I think the offense that you saw last season without Zion, right, for the majority of the season, and then BI obviously missing as well, a lot of that is remedied with BI and Zion on the floor. The shots become more open, and I think by the shots being more open, you get more chances to do it, because you have, like you said, the Pelicans were 29th in three-point attempts. And I think part of that was because everybody was staying home, and you would have one person stay in front of, if BI was out there, okay, well, now you're swamped. Take your mid-range shots. But I think if you have both of those guys out there, you get more open shots for CJ. You get more open shots for Trey Murphy. Jordan Hawkins, if he becomes the guy that, everybody thinks he is, that's another shooter around him. And you're going to be mixing and matching, right? You have this roster where BI and Zion don't have to be on the floor every single second of every single minute of every single game. You can stagger those guys, right? And so if you have Zion attached to a Trey Murphy and BI attached to a Jordan Hawkins, where as long as if Zion is off the floor and BI is, then Jordan Hawkins has to be out there along with CJ and whoever, and you mix and match it. Not every team is strapped like the Warriors or strapped like the Kings, where you just bring people off the floor to shoot. It doesn't work like that, right? It sometimes it doesn't happen. The Heat, for as great as they shot in the postseason, they were awful in the regular season.
I think they were last in points.
Yeah, they were terrible in the regular season. But once you get into the playoffs is such a different thing, where guys can lock in, and all of those numbers those percentages go out the window once the regular season ends. I think that you have some of that with the Pelicans. With CJ, I think CJ is going to have a much better season shooting. I think Trey Murphy is going to have more opportunities. He has now landed as a part of the big 3.5 or big 4, if you want to call it, with Trey and CJ and BI and Zion. And Jordan Hawkins, all he did was shoot threes in college. So I think you have enough shooting around. Now, could you always add some? That's my 30%. Obviously, right? If you can find some guys out there that can shoot, that'll take a veteran's minimum, then fine, go do it. Or if it's part of a trade coming up, you bring in a shooter along with, if you're looking for that rim protection. But I think, as BI said last season, if you really in a pinch need shooting, right, two of the guys on the floor at the end of games is going to be BI, Zion. CJ is probably going to be out there. You're probably going to have either Trey or Herb, depending on what's going on with the game. Or both, right? You either have both or you have one or the other, and then probably, either a big or some other version or shooter or Larry Nance, whatever. You're gonna have opportunities to have those guys on the floor and space the floor for them. And I think with BI now taking this playmaking leap and starting to kind of incorporate moving the ball and getting guys involved is only going to help the guys around him, because he's going to demand so much attention along with Zion. I think that there's enough, but I do think if I wouldn't be upset if they went out and added a shooter just for insurance purposes, because everybody knows we don't always stay healthy in New Orleans, no matter if it's the Saints or the Pelicans or me in general, with this heat out there. And so somebody's going to miss some time. So if you go out and get another shooter, fine. But again, the big asterisk, if this team is healthy, I think there's enough shooting, shooting to be enough to supplement the tandem of a BI and Zion.
I tend to agree, because again, I agree with you that Brandon Ingram needs to shoot more threes, and so that should help.
Yes.
I think CJ, the quality of his threes, even though he shot very well, he made some of the most threes in the NBA this year. People don't look at that because they see kind of the end of the season with the injury, but he shot pretty well, one of his best years from three. I think he's going to get more. Trey's going to get more. Jordan Hawkins has to get more. I think if you look at that list of defenders, and if you can get Herb to 36% and Kyra to 36%, I think you'll live with that and you'll be just fine, because you're right. With the Pelicans, they're never going to lead the NBA in three-point attempt. Their two best players are better inside the three-point line than they are outside of it. So why would they be up there with the Steph and the Clays and things like that. But at the same time, if you can keep teams honest and you can hit them, and the quality of them are incredible because you have to dedicate 4 guys to guard Zion, like I think it should be enough. It should be enough, but we shall see. With that being said, again, the U.S. plays on Saturday again. You'll get another chance to see Brandon Ingram, and the Saints are on Sunday. But what you got left for the people, Garrett?
As always, you never know what people are going through, so give someone a smile today. Sports are the main bloodline of sports are starting to matriculate back in. I'll be excited to see Luka kind of take on this team and see if Ant has always talked about he wants to guard the best players. But I'd like to see PI take a shot. I like to see it. Hey man, like show the young guys that and Herb and Dyson that, hey man, I'm behind you. Like I'm out there with the wing defenders too. I'm part of Wingstop too. So it should be very exciting. As always, follow myself at Garrick_Rattler. Follow my brother at Raphael_Rattler. Follow the page at NO Basketball No E on Twitter, on Instagram. Like the episode and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you guys next time.